Welcome to the BXG podcast, the podcast where pop culture and nerd culture meet at the nexus of the universe and are melded as seamlessly as Grape Nuts and Punxsutawney Phil. This is a interesting episode as I am one of your hosts, the Alpha Donut guy, Brenton Beswick. And tonight I'm joined by no one. Greg is on vacation. And there was a couple potential guest hosts that fell through for one reason or another. So what we decided to do was solicit some questions, comments, concerns, thoughts, ideas from the audience and kind of take those as a bit of a mailbag episode. So I know this would be the part of the typical show where I would ask Greg how he's doing, and he would say something to the effect of, well, I've been out here traveling a little bit and getting to the ballparks. Giving me a great opportunity to listen to some Charlie XCX, cripes and that sort of thing. But Greg's taking the week off, and he's already assured me that he has some fun tales of his travels to share with us next week. And if you're looking at this point for the Thor Love and Thunder review or the Miss Marvel season finale review, you'll have to wait another week, as that will be next week when Greg makes his triumphant return to the show. The show, which of course publishes every 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Podbean, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon, Google, wherever you get your podcasts. And you can check us out on our social media, BXG Podcast, at BXG Podcast on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook.com/BXG Podcasts, and over on our YouTube channel for trailer reactions and reviews. So we do have, I did get a lot of feedback, which is pretty exciting for some of the folks that wrote in. We have all manner of questions, from some movie questions, some TV questions, some games questions, some food questions, and just some general silly questions. And I think that that's kind of where I want to lead off at. And our first question comes from Austin Garza from the Tournament Style podcast. And I know I've talked a lot about Tournament Style, and they've been on a few times. Most recently, Guillermo came on for the Red Hot Chili Peppers Unlimited Love review. We've done their show and, pretty good friends with those guys. But if you haven't had a chance yet, check out their podcast, Tournament Style. It is really funny, which is kind of where one of these questions comes from, or where Austin's questions comes from. And it's, how much on a scale of 1 to 10 do you hate Punxsutawney Phil? And this kind of comes from their run where they have done 2 or 3 episodes on holiday mascots, where they tournament the different holiday mascots. And I know Austin to be a big hater of Punxsutawney Phil. And the funny thing about Punxsutawney Phil is, where I'm at here in Western Pennsylvania, we're only about maybe an hour and 15 minutes, hour and a half from Gobbler's Knob, where they do pull Punxsutawney Phil out every year on Groundhog's Day. And I actually am familiar with one of the gentlemen who assists in the eviction process of the groundhog from his hole, the Honorable Judge John Foradora. But as far as how much I hate Punxsutawney Phil, I'm pretty indifferent on Punxsutawney Phil. I don't really have a deep-seated hatred for him. I know a lot of people, maybe cast some blame on him for crappy weather, especially here in Western Pennsylvania, where it's pretty crappy more often than not. But I really don't have any hatred for Punxsutawney Phil. Without Punxsutawney Phil and the Groundhog Day celebration, we wouldn't have gotten the classic 80s movie Groundhog Day from Bill Murray. My biggest beef is actually going to be with Gus, the second most famous groundhog in Pennsylvania, and that is kind of a nod towards Punxsutawney Phil, but it's a mascot for the PA scratch-off lottery games. And if some of our Pennsylvania listeners will remember Gus, the second most famous groundhog in Pennsylvania, they'll remember his stupid ass grin from some of those commercials in the 2004 to 2012, maybe 2015 range, where they kind of parroted Phil and into this Gus character. I'm not a big fan of him. I would say he's high on the hate scale, but Phil himself is I'm pretty indifferent towards Punxsutawney Phil. The next question comes from John Patterson, a good friend of mine, and he asks, Grape Nuts cereal, no grapes, no nuts. What's the deal? So did a little research to prepare for not just this question, but many questions tonight. But the Grape Nuts cereal has been around since 1897. And while there are no grapes or nuts, the legend states that C.W. Post believes that glucose, what he referred to as grape sugar, formed during the baking process. The other tale says it got its name from its resemblance to grape seeds or grape nuts. So that is, I guess, the official answer, and that's right on the Post Consumer Brands website if you wanted to check that out. I guess I didn't know when he asked the question what grape nuts were. I thought that maybe they were a sort of like dehydrated raisin sort of thing found in a trail mix, but alas, it is a very old cereal. But there are in fact no grapes nor nuts in the cereal, but that is the reason why. Let's see here. Gotta kind of taking some of the goofier questions first, or some of the less specific questions. Okay, here we go. Is cereal soup? And this comes from our recent co-host of our 2000s favorite songs episode, Barry Jones. He was our guest for that episode, and very capable guy on the mic. Hoping to get him back at some point. But is cereal soup? The definition from Merriam-Webster of soup is a liquid dish typically made by boiling meat, fish, or vegetables, etc., in stock or water, or a substance or mixture perceived to resemble soup in appearance or consistency. And so it's the second definition, a substance or mixture perceived to resemble soup in an appearance or consistency, that I actually think checks the box as far as answering that question, whether or not cereal is soup. If you take it from the first listed definition, made by boiling meat, fish, or vegetables in stock or water, I think clearly that it is not soup. However, a substance or mixture perceived to resemble soup in appearance or consistency suggests that cereal is in fact soup. And I just had some nice cinnamon toast crunch, some CT crunch, if you will, here before I started recording. And I'm curious for the listeners, and you can get back to me. What is your favorite brand of cereal? What is your favorite cold soup, as it were? Okay, let us know. Let me know. Let us know in the comments. Reply to the Instagram. Okay, let's see here. Best summer blizzard from Dairy Queen, and why does Dairy Queen consistently outperform the competition? Well, I don't think I don't think that there's an answer to best summer blizzard. There are blizzards that are specifically geared towards summer, the tropical blizzard, for example. But I think blizzards are going to be the same year round, at least what I go for, which is my go-to is the cookie dough at M&M's. Give yourself a nice little cookie dough, like an M&M cookie. But Reese's is also fine. I don't really get into the different themed flavors that they have. I have tried the peanut butter cookie, which is Reese's Pieces and cookie dough, but they put a little bit of peanut butter sauce in there, and I don't particularly like that. I like a nice vanilla. I like the core to be just vanilla, and the rest of it can kind of do what it wants. But I like the vanilla. I don't have a preference, really. Like I said, summer over any other. Some of the flavors that they get are batshit insanity. Pumpkin pie blizzard, candy cane blizzard. I think the worst, I can answer what the worst blizzard has been, and that's the frosted animal cracker, or the frosted animal cookie blizzard. That is That is an abomination from the seventh circle of hell. But as to why Dairy Queen blizzards consistently outperform the competition, I think it's personally because a Dairy Queen blizzard is nice and smooth, and really the only place that has the nice smooth ice cream. It's not hard ice cream, add a little bit of milk to smooth it out, like you get at a lot of your mom and pop stores with knockoff names like Tornado or Freeze. But I think the only other place that you can get something with just nice smooth ice cream is actually McDonald's. But the problem there, obviously, is that their ice cream machines are never working. But I think that the reason why Dairy Queen blizzards are so smooth yet tend to hold on to at least some of their thickness is it's all about the science. The DQ soft serve has high viscosity because of the emulsifiers and ingredients to stop the soft serve from separating into separate components and hold on to the introduced air when they are evacuated from the ice cream machine. So I think that's the reason why the Blizzard it's a nice, soft, smooth serve, but also tends to retain its thickness with the candy involved. It's a good question. That one came from David S. from Carn City, friend of the program. Okay. Let's do a movie. Let's do a movie question here. And this one comes from our good friend Tyler McAfee. Cut one director: Nolan, Scorsese, Spielberg, or Tarantino. And this one's actually going to be surprisingly easy for me because it kind of comes down to what is in each of these guys' catalog that is exciting or interesting to me. I mean, Christopher Nolan's probably my favorite director right now. And it's not just the Batman thing. Inception, Interstellar, The Prestige, Memento, all great films. Looking forward to Oppenheimer with a lot of our favorite actors in it: RDJ, Cillian Murphy, Florence Pugh, to name a few. There's others. So I think Nolan's safe in this exercise. He's safe pretty easily. The next one that I would say is definitely also safe is going to be Spielberg. I mean, this is a guy who has directed countless classic movies, some of which are my favorites, the Indiana Jones trilogy. Now, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull notwithstanding, but I think Spielberg stays. Hook, another favorite, Jaws, what have you. Spielberg's safe. So it really comes down to Scorsese and Tarantino. And for me, I like Tarantino a little bit better than Martin. Some of his movies that are on my hit list are Reservoir Dogs, Pulp Fiction, obviously, and then the Kill Bill movies. And I just don't get into Scorsese as much. I like Goodfellas. I'm fine with The Departed. Outside of that, I haven't seen a lot of his stuff because it just doesn't have the same level of interest to me. I'm kind of the mind that once you see one organized crime movie, you've kind of seen them all. Or at least shades of that. And so for me, the person that gets cut here is going to be Scorsese. But I think it all comes down to taste because there's probably plenty of people that would cut Spielberg or cut Tarantino. But I think for me, Scorsese is the one that doesn't make this cut. And since we're here with the movie stuff, and we actually got a couple questions from Greg from the road, from Chicago, as he's at visiting Wrigley Field this evening. What's your favorite action movie? So favorite action movie, and I think we have to dissect this a little bit. So I think that when we talk about action movies, we're talking about there's movies with action in them, but they're not necessarily action movies. Or you could say a Marvel movie is an action movie, but we've made the case many a time on the show that at this point Marvel is sort of its own genre. So to me, an action movie is something that's going to be just a kind of a dumb romp, something you don't have to think about, something that you're not really that invested in the plot, that sort of thing. I think Michael Bay obviously is very action oriented, but for me right now, I think my favorite action movie, outside of some of those things that we mentioned, Marvel movies, Star Wars movies are more action based, Indiana Jones. But I would actually say right now what I'm leaning towards is the Fast franchise. It's comical in how ridiculous it is. I mean, Ludacris and Tyrese flew a Pontiac whatever into space in Fast 9. And they're good enough or they're entertaining enough to hold your attention. It's not something that's so comically bad or so comically ridiculous that you tune it out, because obviously these movies have made a boatload of money. They're getting ready to either start filming or they're close to wrapping on Fast 10. I mean, there's been 10 of these things, right? So I'm sure if I went into the vault and thought really deeply about this, I could come up with something else. But right now, for the moment, I'm going to say that the Fast movies, and if I had to narrow it down to one, I would probably say Fast 7. Okay. Let's see here. This is another good one. This is from our friend John Kish. Best movie basketball player, not including NBA players playing themselves. So LeBron and Michael are out for Space Jam. Some of the other characters that make cameos and different things, and I really think that this comes down to two options. I think the first option is very clearly Jesus Shuttlesworth, played by Ray Allen in Spike Lee's He Got Game. Played very capably as well. It kind of set the standard for athletes making that transition towards movie. I don't want to say stars, but actors. Shuttlesworth had it all. I mean, he was whatever D1 college. People were in his ear about going straight to the NBA, so he had top lottery pick profile. So I think that he's a very worthy choice of this particular moniker. The other character that I have in mind is Scott Howard, played by Michael J. Fox in the 1980s film Teen Wolf. And for those who may remember, Teen Wolf was Scott was a great high school basketball player. Front flips, you name it. I mean, he carried the team. But the issue there, and I think what gives Jesus Shuttlesworth the win, or this title of best movie basketball player, is that Scott was a little bit selfish. He's a bit of a prima donna. Didn't bring the wolf out all the time. Could have taken it for the team, but big me, little team guy, some would say. So that's why I'm going to say that Jesus Shuttlesworth, as I said, played by Ray Allen, would be the winner of that particular debate. Okay. Let's see here. Let's do a game. Let's do a gaming question. And this one comes from also our friend John. The new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, the Shredder's Revenge game is great. I heard it was made by the same people as Streets of Rage 4. Are they planning an expansion or any kind of downloadable content? So Streets of Rage 4 was made by .emu, and I hope I'm saying that correctly. I might not be, but the TMNT Shredder's Revenge was made by Tribute Games with .emu as the acting publisher. Some other Tribute games of note: Ninja Senkai DX and Curses and Chaos. I think I have both of those. I don't know that I've ever played them. There's nothing on the docket specifically from Tribute yet as to a DLC or sequel to Shredder's Revenge, but there is a retro collection that doesn't have anything to do with either of these particular teams. But there is a retro collection called the Cowabunga Collection. And it features 13 different 8-bit and 16-bit games, including the classic NES Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles game, known for its outlandishly hard difficulty, and then the much beloved arcade and later console edition of the side-scrolling beat 'em up Turtles in Time. One of my favorite games from that era. I love Turtles in Time on both the arcade and on the SNES. But if you're a gamer, if you're listening to this and you play games, Turtles in Time is $25 on the PlayStation Store or Steam or Xbox storefront, what have you. And it's really great. It's a great blast of retro goodness, just straight nostalgia, but the game plays really well as well. And I'd like to see, I don't know what they would look to do as far as the DLC, maybe adding more playable characters, some of the different heroes outside of like Casey Jones, Splinter, and April that have fought with the turtles here and there. And that would be certainly cool. Maybe fold in some of the lesser known villains, but they already did a really great job of kind of finding all of those villains from the old Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon series, with also a little bit of spice thrown in there of Token Razar from Ninja Turtles 2 Secret of the Ooze, the live action game. But I think that they did a great job. I think that they are this collection that's coming out is going to be, really interesting. And the thing that I find interesting about this is that we're getting all of this turtle stuff at once. And I wonder if this is sort of Nickelodeon, who owns the rights to the turtles at this point, kind of testing the waters to see if maybe it's time to bring the turtles back in some way or another. I know we got the Michael Bay movies that weren't exactly highly regarded, but I also don't think that they were, poo-pooed on in the same way that some of the Michael Bay Transformers movies are. But I do think that this is a case of maybe Nickelodeon testing the waters with this IP, and I certainly think Tribute delivered. And I'd love to see them. They're obviously a talented team with an eye for this kind of game. I'd like to see them maybe take a crack at something like G.I. Joe or Transformers. I think that would be pretty cool. Okay, this is another funny one. This comes from our friend Bradley Bookter, and we had a similar question the last time. We did a mailbag episode that was with Ty, our friend Ty, who came on for the Dune episode, the Dune review, the last time that Greg was down in Miami on vacation. And we had the question, which Star Wars character smells like weed? And in this iteration, we have which Star Wars character smells the most like alcohol. and I think there's probably some easy answers if you want some deep cuts, as far as like the characters that were found in the cantina in Mos Eisley in A New Hope, or on Coruscant in Attack of the Clones. But I think that you need to go with a mainline character for a question like this. And I think that the answer to this is clearly Lando Calrissian. And this is a guy he's very suave. I mean, maybe he doesn't smell like alcohol because he's covering up with some nice cologne, maybe a polo, maybe a little Ralph Lauren. But I do think that Lando probably has a drink from time to time. I mean, he's a gambler. He's a smuggler. He's a guy who settled down and ran a city. And, that can be really stressful, running a city, running a mining operation, having to keep an eye out for the Empire. It can be a bit taxing. I think it's a reason that somebody like Lando might hit the bottle every now and again. There's a good chance of that. But I think that Lando is my pick. Number 2 pick there would probably be Nim Num, who's, if you're not familiar with the characters' names of some of these sort of third party or bit role players, who was piloting the Falcon with Lando in Return of the Jedi. And I just feel like that fella's lips were real moist the whole time, like he was drinking something. Maybe it was just water. You got to stay hydrated, I guess. But good chance that those two together, Lando and Neem Num, whatever, are maybe hitting the booze together. Okay. Which movie derelict scumbag piece of crap is your favorite? And this is kind of an interesting question, because this is the question that asks you to focus on somebody who's maybe not that great of a guy. Maybe somebody who is a little bit counterculture. Maybe it's somebody that is a little bit rough around the edges, that sort of thing. And I think he has to be somebody who's not necessarily somebody that the kids would look up to, but not somebody who's intelligent, because like, who's a piece of crap? Well, I mean, kind of Ian Malcolm, Jeff Goldblum in the original Jurassic Park, kind of shady, but I'm thinking of somebody who's, John said derelict here. So I'm going to go with Randy Quaid in Independence Day, Russell Cass. He's a drunkard and tries to convince everybody that he was once abducted and everything. But at the end, he's the one that saves the day. Spoilers for a 25, 30-year-old movie, but he's the one that kind of saves the day at the end and says, "Hello, boys, I'm back." But I think that would be probably my favorite derelict. I don't know if he's necessarily a scumbag or a piece of crap, but he's definitely a derelict. Scumbag. Some of these are, you could go with some of the characters from Snatch. I mean, Mickey the Gypsy, played by Brad Pitt in Snatch, is kind of fits the bill a little bit. But I think that's what I'm gonna keep my answer there with Randy Quaid, Russell Case, Independence Day. Okay, best and worst thing about where you live. So I live in Western Pennsylvania. So the best thing is nothing, and the worst thing is everything. And I think that pretty much sums that up. There's not a lot. I don't think there's anything else that to really say about that. Has Instagram ever convinced you to buy anything? No, not that I already was. Nothing that I wasn't already planning on buying anything, but I will say that on many an occasion I've bought something, had no prior conversations or seen any advertisements about it on Instagram, and then not only Instagram, but Instagram, Facebook, Bleacher Report is miraculously filled with advertisements for whatever that thing happened to be. If I ordered it off of Amazon or Google searched it for a purchase, very quickly my feed was filled up with just gobbledygook of whatever this product was, because I purchased it online and not in a store. So no, Instagram is not a big factor for me when it comes to advertising and buying things. Better golf tournament to watch, the Masters or the US Open? Neither. I'd rather watch AstroTurf grow than watch golf. So there's that. No offense if you like watching golf. Okay. Is water wet? I feel like this is an age-old question. As I have a drink of water here. But really, the question isn't, we're going to get real philosophical here. The question isn't whether or not water is wet. The question is whether or not liquid is wet. Because if water is wet, would not lemonade be wet, per example? I think it's an all-encompassing question of the matter form of liquid. Is liquid wet? And I'm going to say that it's not. And the reason I say this is that I feel as though being that there is moisture in the air from evaporation that can become liquid and make you become wet. For example, real humid day here in Western Pennsylvania that we have from time to time with a humidity of 9,000%. And you can become wet. And so I think the answer is that everything all the time is wet. This table that I'm sitting at is wet. The microphone I'm using is wet. I myself, my hands are wet. So is water wet? Yes and no. Yes, because everything is wet. But no at the same time, because if everything is wet, how can we classify one thing as being wet over another? Some pretty deep stuff. Thanks for the question, Barry Jones. Jamie Foxx or Martin Lawrence? I think that this is a pretty easy one for me. Jamie Foxx. is much better than Martin Lawrence. I don't know that I've ever actually cared to watch anything with Martin Lawrence in it, and Jamie Foxx does have some dramatic roles that do hold up pretty well. Ray obviously won an Academy Award, but my favorite Jamie Foxx movie is probably Collateral, which is interestingly enough a Tom Cruise movie. And if you're a consistent listener, you know my feelings on Tom. But I do like Collateral, and I certainly think it's one of Jamie Foxx's best movies. So that's a pretty easy one for me. Let's see here. We'll do another games related question. Starfield going to be good. People are tearing apart the trailers and saying it's looking outdated, but I feel, this is from our friend John Patterson, I feel like they have let me back up. But I feel like they really have no idea, and there's not enough information to make a determining factor. I think that this is probably based on recency bias, meaning the last few games that Bethesda GameWorks specifically has produced, Fallout 4, and I think they had a hand in Fallout 76. I'd have to double check that, but Fallout 4 definitely was a disappointment, and I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they have not updated their engine since the PS3 and Xbox 360 generation. I do think Starfield's going to be good. Starlight, I was just watching the boys. I do think Starfield's going to be good, and I think that it's going to be interesting, and I think it's going to be a new take on space exploration in maybe a way that No Man's Sky was not. I know a lot of people are comparing the early trailers of Starfield to No Man's Sky, and I think that excuse me, part of the issue and part of the lack of hype for this game, or why people are tearing it down, is that Fallout 4 was just kind of a disappointment. They made a game that wasn't too dissimilar from Fallout 3 or even Skyrim, and the year before that, Witcher 3 came out, and kind of, they out Bethesda. And I think that that's part of the reason why you've seen such a big gap between Fallout 4 and anything else from them as a development studio and not just a publisher. I think that they kind of knew that they needed to go back to the drawing board. I mean, Fallout 4 sold well, but people kind of knew. It wasn't as revolutionary as Fallout 3, certainly, and it wasn't as addictive or kept people coming back in the same way that Skyrim was. I mean, they're still selling Skyrim on new systems today. It's ridiculous. That game's 15 years old or whatever at this point. And they kind of knew, and they knew that they had to go back to the drawing board, and they knew that they had to kind of figure this out and make some changes to that engine. And I'm hopeful that they're able to do that. I mean, for me, this looks is going to be a PC game for me. And I haven't played a PC game in a long time, but given the purchase of Bethesda by Microsoft and them saying this is going to be exclusive to Game Pass and to Xbox and to Windows and PC and such, I won't have an opportunity to play it where I would prefer to play on PlayStation, but it has me excited to the point that I'm willing to play a PC game for the first time in probably over a decade. And so I think that right there should tell you that I personally have some confidence in this game. But only time will tell. And I think that they're doing a decent job of marketing it, and they're saying all the right things, and, we'll see. But I do think right now, if there's any negative vibes toward it, it's because of recency bias, and, whether it's outdated. I will say this, though, is that if it does come out and it's outdated and it has that same janky engine, then they're going to be in a world of hurt, because we kind of saw what happened with Cyberpunk, and, we covered that at length at the time. So I think that they need to deliver, and if they don't, it's going to be a bad look for Bethesda. But I'm pretty confident in their ability to deliver a quality experience with Starfield. O'Neal Cruz, Pirates shortstop, tallest, fastest shortstop ever. A quick Google search tells us that Cal Ripken Jr. was the tallest shortstop, and he was 6'4", and O'Neal Cruz is 6'7". So yeah, that would put him as the tallest shortstop ever. As far as speed, I know the rumor is that he ran I don't know if it was a 40 or something like that, faster than Tyreek Hill, formerly of the Kansas City Chiefs, now of the Miami Dolphins, who's definitely got some burners on him. So, yeah, I mean, tallest, fastest shortstop ever. I mean, sounds like it. As far as whether he'll stay a shortstop, I don't know. I don't know if somebody that tall can handle the rigors of that position. I mean, 6'7" sounds more like a first baseman or an outfielder or even a pitcher. But we'll see. I know that he's given the Pirates faithful something to root about this year, which is, and it seems like they've maybe got some pieces coming up. I mean, Brian Hayes also seems like he's going to be a quality ball player. So we'll see if the Pirates can kind of put together a team or a young roster here that's going to be competitive. But they have a couple good pieces, a couple good starting, building blocks, it seems like. And we'll see. But I wouldn't count on it if I was a Pirates fan. I certainly wouldn't hold your breath. Okay. Biggest Emmy snubs. So the primetime Emmys, the nominations were announced. I'm not going to get too deep into that because I do think that that's probably something that Greg and I will cover next week when he's back. But I will get into my Emmy snubs. And I think that there's a couple for me personally that I found to be very surprising. I found it very surprising that We Own This City was not nominated for Best Limited Series. I thought that was nonsense, really. My favorite show of the year thus far, HBO Max, David Simon produced, kind of a spiritual successor to The Wire, if you will. I also think that Greg, I know Greg will disagree with me on this, but I also kind of think Our Flag Means Death not being nominated for Best Comedy Series, not to win, but to be nominated. I think Ted Lasso is obviously going to clean up the comedy awards, but it would have been nice to get a nomination for Our Flag Means Death. I mean, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was also a little bit surprised that Under the Banner of Heaven did get nominated for Best Limited. Garfield did get nominated for Best Actor in a Limited, so there was that, and I think that is I think that's good. And I mean, there was a lot of White Lotus for the limited categories, like it was flooded. And so whether or not some of these other shows do well, we'll see. But a lot of Succession, a lot of White Lotus, a lot of Ted Lasso. But yeah, we'll probably cover that a little bit more next week, and maybe get Greg's snubs as well. Speaking of snubs, Emmy snubs, and I think that this probably falls into that category again, but it's kind of I think it's a weird time thing, is the other case with some of these nominations. It's based upon times and windows and such. But I would say another snub would be The Boys. And a question regarding The Boys is, why do we on the podcast not talk about The Boys more? It needs more discussion. It is more original than most stuff Marvel or DC puts out. So the first thing I'll say on the topic of why we don't talk about it more is that Greg has not watched it, and he has said that he would like to go back and watch it. But at this time, without him, without him having seen it, it's kind of hard to have a comprehensive discussion on that. Now, as far as the other piece, and this is another one of these questions that we'd like to hear from the audience about and kick it back to us, but is something more original if it's satire of something that is much older? So The Boys debuted comic form in 2006, and it is a Dynamite Entertainment comic. And if you haven't heard of, you may not have heard of Dynamite Comics or Dynamite Entertainment Comics, but surely you've heard of Bob's Burgers, Army of Darkness, Battlestar Galactica, Betty Boop, Mighty Mouse, The Twilight Zone, for example, Zorro, Xena Warrior Princess, RoboCop. These are all The Expendables, Flash Gordon. These are all Green Hornet, another. These are all comics that are from Dynamite Entertainment. So while you may not have heard of Dynamite Entertainment, you've certainly heard of a lot of those IP. And like I said, October 2006 through November 2012 was the publication of the Boys comics. And meanwhile, the Justice League, who clearly is being aped by the Boys, March 1960 was their first on-screen debut, or on-page debut. And obviously, I mean, the Watchtower is the base of the Justice League. And then you have Vought Tower. Homelander is an approximation of Superman. Noir is an approximation of Batman. Maeve is an approximation of Wonder Woman. The Deep, obviously, A-Train. These are all satirical versions of the Justice League characters. And you can get into a little bit deeper in some of the politics, especially here in the third season, that they've been doing. And this isn't to poo-poo on the Boys, because I love the Boys and I'm finishing the third season right now. I think it's great. I think that the satire that they inject into the show, and I think that the political commentary is on point for today's society. And I think that they're doing a great job within the constraints of the comic arc, but also injecting satire of our own society. I think they're doing a wonderful job with that. But I just think that to say that it's more original is missing the point a little bit, when something's very clearly satire or bordering on parody. To say that it's more original than Marvel or DC, I would agree that at the moment, especially, it's of much higher quality than anything that's coming out of either of those camps, other than probably Suicide Squad and Peacemaker on the DC side, and the Batman, obviously, from earlier in the year. But right now, The Boys is probably the best content in the superhero game right now. I think that Marvel is stumbling, and I think we'll talk about that more with Miss Marvel and Thor next week. But they're in a weird place right now, and I think that, if anything, this is a good time for DC to kind of try to seize the reins. But the odds of that happening are pretty limited, because they do not have any characters worth a damn outside of Batman. Okay, so that's the Boys commentary. All right. Why is Hollow Knight Silk Song taking so long? So Hollow Knight we'll go back a little bit. Hollow Knight was a Kickstarter project, and it released in the mid-teens, 2000 teens. And Silk Song was announced as a DLC, originally as a DLC pack in February of 2019, as it was a stretch goal to make one of the other characters a second playable character in the Kickstarter campaign. But then they later decided to expand to a full sequel. And between COVID delays that slowed the industry as a whole, and the decision to expand the sequel to a full-out game is probably what's caused the delay. In many respects, it reminds me of the wait between Uncharted 4, which was released May 10, 2016, and Uncharted Lost Legacy, which was released August 17, 2017. Lost Legacy was also originally just supposed to be a 2 or 3 hour DLC, and then was expanded to a full-length game of about 12 to 14 hours. And the biggest difference, obviously, no COVID at the time that they were making the Lost Legacy expansion, but also the Naughty Dog team's a few hundred strong. And even if they took 50 off of The Last of Us Part 2, or 25, however many, to just sit and work on Lost Legacy, they're able to devote more resources. They're able to outsource. They're able to contract with, some of these shadow devs that work on things that just do assets or what have you. Meanwhile, Team Cherry, who's made Hollow Knight, is 3 guys. And so when you have COVID and then you make the decision to make something that was a DLC into its own thing, that's going to slow production down. And I think that that's probably likely as to why Silk Song has maybe taken a little bit longer than some fans would have liked. Okay. Favorite actor and actress. Favorite actor is probably Christian Bale. These things ebb and flow, and he has had some stinkers in the last however many years that were not up to his par, I don't think. But excuse me, at the end of the day, I do think that he still holds the title for my favorite actor. Favorite actress is a little bit trickier for me. I don't know that there's anyone specifically that I would say, oh, such and such is in this movie, I have to see it. But I also think on the other side of that is that women actresses, female actresses can deliver more powerful and more moving performances. And I think that seeing those performances maybe etch something out. But I think of Jennifer Lawrence, for example, as being one of my favorite actresses between the Hunger Games and then things like Silver Linings Playbook, American Hustle, what have you. She's in Don't Look Up, plays an interesting character there. But then she makes some really, really poor clunkers, like I think it was called The Red Room, for example. Just checking that out. And this was a movie that bombed so badly that I don't think that there's a number associated for it on Rotten Tomatoes with that review. Red Sparrow, that's it. But I do genuinely I do like Jennifer Lawrence. She's maybe one of my favorites. Some other ones to think about. I'm not really sure. I'd have to. Anne Hathaway. I'm a big fan of Anne Hathaway as well. I don't know that she has. I mean, she won supporting actress for Les Mis, and she really campaigned hard for that. But she's maybe my favorite Catwoman. I think I like her better than Zoe Kravitz. She's done some more TV stuff recently, that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, I would say that those off the cuff are probably two of my favorites. Florence Pugh's really starting to kind of work her way into the top, that top tier of actress for me as well. She's doing some interesting things. Okay. What are some upcoming game releases that you're excited for? So on a PlayStation side of things, obviously God of War Ragnarok comes here in November, and I'm very excited for that. I'm excited for The Last of Us Part 1, the reimagining from the ground up of the original game. But for me, probably the game that I'm most excited for, and this is going to be a super deep cut, but it's going to be Ayuden Chronicles 100 Hero, I believe 100 Heroes, I think it's called. I just played Ayuden Chronicle 100 Heroes. I just played the prequel game, Ayuden Chronicle Rising, which is more of a hack and slasher. But Ayuden Chronicles is a spiritual successor to the late 90s, early 2000s Japanese role-playing game Suikoden, which is one of my favorite games of that genre of any time. And it's a lot of the same people making the game. And I can really say that the prequel game that was more of a standalone experience that will later tie into the main game gave me those same vibes. The music, the animation, some of the storytelling, it was all very reminiscent of Suikoden 1 and 2 especially, and that is some major comfort food for me. And actually I had taken kind of a pretty extensive break from playing games. I hadn't really played anything from about Christmas time until the beginning of June, when I picked up a Mutant Chronicle Rising, and a little bit of 2K, NBA 2K here and there, and picked my way through some of the stuff with like Horizon Forbidden West, but hadn't been playing a lot. Been watching more TV, watching more movies, doing some reading, doing some other projects, stuff like that. And that was the game that really got me back into playing games more recently. And I can say that I'm very excited for the full game that comes out here next year, 2023. And it has all the same elements: castle building, building your team up with over 100 characters, extensive mini games. It's going to be a geopolitical storyline that's going to be well written, I'm sure. And I'm just excited for that. I'm very excited for that. I'm excited to dive in. It's been a while since I've gotten a chance to play a game like that, with just the absolute gorgeous sprite-based animations that are totally timeless. They're very hard to craft, but if you can do them right and they look top tier, then that's a game that will stand the test of time. And I'm very excited about it. It was one of the most successful Kickstarters ever. Is Miss Marvel worth watching, or is it just for kids? So without getting into any spoilers, because we are going to do that review next week. Yeah, I think it's worth watching. It's 6 episodes. The episodes are a little on the longer side for what the story is giving you, but I think that especially towards the end of the season, things really wrap up nicely. There's good action. The story is interesting, especially when they get into kind of the history of the characters and such. And there's some important stingers in the finale. But if it's not something that you really are into or want to watch, you can always read about those particular things to keep you up to date with the ever expanding Marvel Cinematic Universe. Okay. Will you ever have a mustache like Miles Teller in Top Gun Maverick? Absolutely not. I feel as though if I had a mustache, I would look like Luigi from Mario Brothers, and that's not really a look that I'm trying to adopt anytime soon. And trying to see, that might be all of the questions that we have for tonight. Go back through the document one more time. Have you watched Terminal List? Thoughts? No, I have not. But it is something that I would consider getting to. I would say a little bit of hesitation in terms of Christopher Pratt and him working with Amazon. Specifically has not meted out anything as of yet that was terribly well regarded. His first film that he did with Amazon was The Tomorrow War from 2021, and it was not great according to critics. And that's a Christmas Came movie. J.K. Simmons, Yvonne Charlowski, among others, Sam Richardson. Didn't do so hot. I think that IGN, which is not necessarily in a per se an authority on movie reviews in the same way that I would trust them for game reviews, gave it a 3, I want to say, and currently 51 critical on Rotten Tomatoes and that's for The Tomorrow War, and that's just the first movie Christopher Pratt worked on for Amazon Prime. The Terminal List, we did a trailer reaction. You can kind of check that out. This is one of those weird sort of split things on RT. It's 40 critical, 95 audience score. And I know that Christopher needs some publicity because the new Jurassic Park movie wasn't that great, and he has a habit of saying dumb shit on the internet that make people not tend to like him too much. So he definitely needs to pick up. And the terminal list might be helping him do that, but if not, he's always got the Guardians stuff to fall back on, which we will get the Guardians holiday special here this holiday season. But that's it. That's all the questions, and we thank everybody. I thank everybody. Greg's not here to thank you, but he thanks you in spirit. He said, "I thank you. It's really nice that you all did this, and I appreciate it." Correct. And so you catch us 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 6 a.m. Pacific, 4 a.m. Hawaiian. On podcast services, wherever you get your podcasts, Spotify, Apple, Google, Amazon, you name it, we're there. And you can check us out on our social media feeds, facebook.com/BHG podcast, Instagram @BHG podcast, @GTFills, and @Greg_T_Fills, and @Alpha Donut Guy. And you can check us out over on Twitter @BHG podcast, @Alpha Donut Guy, and @GT Filson. And our YouTube. Check us out on our YouTube for movie reviews, trailer reactions. Amsterdam was the most recent to go up with John David Washington, Christian Bale, many others. I almost said Joe Rogan, but no, Seth Rogen, Chris Rock, others. There's others involved. Many others. Many others for Amsterdam. Some other ones too. Hocus Pocus 2. The Deadliest Game, starring Chris C.T. Tamburello of the Challenge fame. Check that out. So yeah, I think that's it. And I had a good time doing this one-man show thing. It was just kind of stressful. I felt like I was talking faster than usual. I felt like I was talking faster, and I stuttered a lot. And I didn't have time to get drinks because usually Greg has things to say and I can take a pause and have some agua. Didn't have that. So, but it was a different experience, but I also kind of liked it. So back to regular scheduling program next week. We're going to pick up with our final music list, our favorite songs of the 70s. Will release on Monday, July 18th. And back with the regular show next Friday, July 22nd. So if you have enjoyed this, like, subscribe, share, tell your friends, tell your families, and tell your mothers and your part-time lovers about the unmistakable essence of the BXG podcast. Take care. Have a great weekend. Goodbye.